So in other words, do we have to wait for that information from the county for everything before we issue a permit?
The county or our own process.
Okay, and so currently we don't have any kind of math or rule for, you know, like we were talking about the up to 30% damage. There's no SISD packet required, right? But that 30% damage has to be determined by a pretty extensive site visit if we do it, or waiting for information for the county. There isn't any ability just to look at the numbers and go, well, clearly this one's fine.
No, so currently there is not a process by which we can hang our hat on that I would suggest you would pass a potential audit. And as we know, and as we've heard, you know, the risks are very real. And we know that communities on the seaboard are facing some of those consequences of perhaps having deficiencies in their process. That said, I do think that there's opportunity for us to make some common sense decisions that ultimately get proofed after the fact. I'm not suggesting permits after the fact. I'm suggesting perhaps we issue permits before an SD determination can be made for full repair. So I think we have to establish what those thresholds are. Maybe if the water did not, you know, go above your receptacle, as an example. I don't know. Again, that's sort of the exploration that we're doing to try to figure out exactly, to your point, how do we move them from approved to issued if we can't get that SD determination, you know, immediately. I think it's a very important component of how we get people through this process and back into their homes with a fully repaired structure.
Yep, okay.
Great question, thank you. So staffing allocation, I just wanted to share with you where we were pre-hurricane. So this includes code enforcement, which is obviously they're not doing permit specifically, but they are involved in our process to a degree. So we had 9.5 FTEs. The building official, as you know, is a contract employee and often acts as both a plans examiner and a building inspector pre-hurricane. We have added 16.5 at most recent count. As of today, we have added 16.5 FTEs who are doing exclusively hurricane-related work. And then we have commitments from vendors, and we've gone to multiple vendors now to get additional staffing. So 10 more are committed through the end of next week for us to receive. And you can see there that will yield a total of 36. So more than tripling our staff allocation and in some important areas, and I'll show you that next.
How long do we plan on having them?
So the folks out of Tidal Basin that are a part of our mission that's being funded by the state. So we know that we have them, I would say, through mid-April. I'm hearing about potential extensions, which would be interesting. I don't know that they've been approved, but I am hearing that there could be extensions to that, which would be incredible. The other ones, I believe that those are being under contract for similar periods of time. Some of the challenges that we're having, quite frankly, is some of these folks that we're contracting with are getting pulled into multiple communities. So for instance, we've gotten a couple of staffers that have been able to be with us for a few days, but then have to go do work elsewhere and then are coming back. So some of that shuffling is occurring, which, you know, is a little bit challenging with onboarding, but that's where we're at currently with staffing and how folks are being allocated. So this chart shows you how they're being allocated by activity. And so those black lines there show you where we are in post-permit inspections. And this was a question that was asked earlier. How are we going to be able to ensure that we can go out and do an inspection after a permit has been issued to eventually close it out, doing rough and finals? And then plans examiners and packet reviews, as you can see there. So that's the hard line of where we are, where those orange bars land for all of those types of activities. The additional staffing that we have committed to receive through the end of next week are in those really essential areas of permit inspections and plans examination and packet review. So we talked about some of those bottlenecks, getting SD determinations, getting permits fully reviewed, communicating with owner builders about the quality of their permit. That's happening in plans examination, packet review. The other is inspection. So some of those inspectors can be utilized for some of the SD inspections if we need to do so, but it's intended that they'll be doing those post-permit inspections. Any questions about this slide?
So how do we make the determination of how we'll deploy the inspectors that can do the SD determinations? Because that takes it away from us waiting on the county. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
So how are we determining how we deploy those? Are we relying on the customer, the resident, to call and ask for it at that point?
We are, yeah.
Could we go back to the slide before, so,
Are you looking at?
no, the one just before,
Okay.
yes. So so SD inspectors, we don't anticipate any new ones. We have 2.
That's correct. Now, this is, right, they are not building inspectors, they do not have the qualifying license, they have construction experience, and therefore meet the bar for SD inspections. The building inspectors that you see allocated there, 7.5, have the qualifying license to do permit inspections, but they can also do those SD inspection as time permits.
That was, who again, just, that you said the building inspectors?
Correct, yeah.
I'm looking for them on this.
So
I don't
seven,
have my
it's the
reading
second line
glasses.
down.
Second one, third one.
Okay, so we're getting 4 more of those, and they can do the SD inspections.
They can.
And that's really just to help clear out those 180-plus applications that have been approved but haven't been issued a permit because we don't have the SD inspection.
Correct. Yeah, and again, the inspection is the easy part, quite frankly. It takes very little time. It's all the data entry and review.
Right.
So theoretically, we can augment the SD determination letters via the building inspectors that either we have in place or that are coming online. The issue is for the residents to know to ask if they're in the position to ask.
Correct. That said, if we utilize building inspectors to do SD inspections, the next challenge I'm going to have is in the QA/QC. That's the data entry and review. Getting 50 inspections done a day is not going to yield a determination if we can't get the data in the system. So that's where I would then need to address that bottleneck. So while certainly we could deploy them to offset or augment that activity, I would then need to identify resources. That part is probably not difficult because it's not difficult work. There's some complexity to it, requires training, but not a qualifying license, if you will, in order to do that data entry component. But that is where I would then need to identify staffing resources to address that. Not terribly concerned about it, but I recognize that that would be a bottleneck that we would have to address if we decide to deploy building inspectors for SD work.
But at that point, you are handling that in-house. We are not relying on Pinellas County
Correct.
to be able to execute that.
Correct. Now, keeping in mind, Pinellas County has themselves inspected over 2,700 structures. And so they have done the inspections. It's the data processing that clearly is the challenge. I know that they've had to do a couple of re-inspections as well, but it's a challenge, as I've said.
So is there a conflict if there's them putting their, getting the data to us and us going ahead and doing it? Is it the first come, first serve?
Well, it is a question that we've had because this is a fairly subjective art and science kind of activity.
Subjective.
Yeah, so we're looking at, if we get data from the countywide effort and we've conducted our own, we're looking at those and quite honestly, we're going to err on the side of most substantially damaged, which one had the higher calculation, because that's the one that we're going to have to defend. So I hate to say that because it's an inexact process, but that's the way that the process is established and is being conducted certainly by Tidal Basin. And again, we have less data. I would also say that I would probably err on the side of Tidal Basin's efforts because they have access to more data than we do. That's To be honest, that's probably where I would put more weight on the scale, if you will.
I'm just asking because I would think if us as a city are going out, we're actually physically seeing versus the county that didn't necessarily go into somebody's home.
We are not necessarily going into someone's home either.
But if somebody's calling to ask for that inspection,
We are
I
going.
would be home.
We are going out there, and if able to access the home, we do. If we're not able to see inside the home, we are leaving a notice and rescheduling to do an internal site visit. You know, we have some homeowners that are calling from out of state that are requesting some of these things as well. And certainly not in all cases do we have occupancy in the home when we do the inspection. Tidal Basin did as well. They did exterior observation and look through windows kind of thing, and gained access when available. They were knocking on doors and entering when people were home. So our process is not all that dissimilar.
Is there any information that the county has given us about the timing of any of this, or are there any mandated deadlines, or, you know, if the county decides that this is a lot of trouble and we're having a really hard time with this and they don't manage to get all this information to us for 4 months, do we just have to wait? Do we have any recourse over, like, is there a point at which there's a deadline where everybody can say, like, all right, you did your best, but we've got to move on, you know?
I would need to take a look at the agreement that we have, the MOU that we're all under, to find out the terms and conditions about that. And I'm not aware of a stated deadline in that document, but candidly, I haven't looked at that in more than a month and wasn't looking for that at that time.
Yeah.
But I think it's a valid question. I certainly recognize that they've gone out and they've done all of that inspection or observation work. And I certainly understand that the SDE tool, most of us think of it as a very clunky tool to utilize, and yet that's the tool that we're provided. It is a difficult process, and, you know, we're also hearing it's a little bit glitchy, which is why the QA/QC process is pretty intensive. We've heard that it occasionally does arbitrary duplication of records, as an example, and so that process needs to be reviewed and make sure that those things are not occurring. So I can look to see if there's recourse or a time certain in that process that they have to hit. I'm not aware of it, but we can check.
And that tool that we and the county are using, is that the only option? Is that a federally mandated, you must use this tool to make this happen? Or is it just that this tool, do it however you want, this tool's approved, if you do it some other way, you have to justify it?
I do not know if it's federally mandated. I do believe that others are using other tools, and therefore I don't believe that it's federally mandated. Let me say this. I have heard that there are other tools being utilized. I'm not familiar with them or how successful they are being in processing their own SD inspections and determinations. It is the tool that is being used by Tidal Basin, so it is the tool that we are using. So we chose not to explore alternative tools because we wanted to have, to the extent that we could, an apples-to-apples comparison or process as we went through it.
Yeah. Okay.
So the personnel using the Tidal Basin tool or this software is the data entry person from Tidal Basin? Do we have a delay, I mean a backlog of inputting to be done? Do we need to up the data entry position? Get
So
more
my
people?
understanding at the county, last that I heard, they had 30 people doing data entry, and we're looking to supplement that with additional personnel. I don't know if those additional personnel have been obtained and are being utilized at the county. That was the last report that I heard, and that was 2 weeks ago. And I haven't heard, that was actually the Tuesday before the holiday, so 1 week ago, if you will, that they were looking to supplement with additional personnel. We have on our team 4 people, one that is tasked primarily with data entry, and then another that does QC review, and another that does assessment review, the inspection review, and other components of the quality and data entry review process. So, and then we have a supervisor that does a final review to look at both handwritten notes and the outputs associated with the data entry, and then it moves on for substantial damage determination. So The city's building official, when we do our internal process, the city's building official has to endorse that determination before we can issue that letter, and so Luke ultimately sees the final determination. Similarly, with the data that we're getting from Tidal Basin, Luke has to review that and allow us to submit those substantial damage determinations as calculated by Tidal Basin. So that is just a requirement of that process. So
I'm just trying to find out if we're weak in any area.
yeah, well, potentially we could be in the data entry right now that we're not weak with 2 SD inspectors. We are not weak in the data entry area, and I think that the data entry challenge at the countywide effort is being addressed. It's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so minimal repair permits. To date, we have received 35 applications and been able to issue 12 permits. We've been getting applications that are not associated with minimal repair, things like a fence that is not necessary to safely occupy your home. So those kinds of things have been coming in with those MRPs, if you will. We've also had whole house repairs. So the fact that we've issued 12 permits is not that we're not able to process them quickly and efficiently. In fact, we're able to process them over the counter. It is the quality of those minimal repair permits. And so we'll boost that communication to make sure that folks understand what that permit is for and what it is not for, the limitations of it as well, so that we can be more effective in issuing those types of permits. Local historic designation, forgive me because I received an update at this. We are now at 33 applications received, not 25. 10, as of November 19th, I shared with you that 10 had been approved for local historic designation. We have 11 on the agenda for December 12th, and there's another meeting in January that likely will deal with the balance of those applications received. And so a bunch of updates here. We're touching on a number of different things. So I'm going to be Camden for a moment and talk about debris. So the final pass of private residential pickup, as you can see, is December 5th. The last day is December 23rd. I believe Aftermath is anticipating that they'll actually complete residential cleanup on or about the 18th of December. So the commercial properties, as you can see, are also required to remove their debris by December 23rd. Code enforcement has been out notifying folks, courtesy notices and the like. Beginning tomorrow, they will begin issuing those notices of violation for those that have not complied with the requirement. So as we move through that process with them, they will need to comply by December 23rd, or will go to special magistrate. And so the format that we'll be taking is any debris that is not picked up by the 23rd will go to special magistrate. I should say, any debris that is not picked up in a timely basis and before the 23rd, we will take on that activity ourselves through a contracted provider. And the property owner will go to special magistrate and be responsible for reimbursing the city for those hard costs incurred with that pickup. So, and of course, additional penalties may apply, fines and whatnot, as established by the special magistrate process.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes, sir.
So apartment buildings and condos, there's been a lot of pushback on that. Most of them have come to understand that it's a FEMA policy, and that's kind of what we have to live with. Either that or we have to spend our reserves to do it for them, and we haven't agreed to do that. And code enforcement is, as you indicated, giving courtesy notices to condos and apartment buildings, and I guess other businesses. Mm-hmm. But so how are they doing that? I mean, because I know, like in Paso Grill and I believe uptown here, there's a lot of small apartment buildings and the like that the property management isn't necessarily on site. And there may not be many residents there because of the damage to the property. How are these courtesy notices being handled for small apartment complexes that are owned by whoever, investors, whatever, How's the courtesy notifications being applied to those folks? I mean, are we just going out and putting notices on the doors? I haven't seen that personally, that there's been notices on doors. Are we somehow reaching out to the addresses in the property taxes database, or just how's that being handled? Because that's kind of been a question of mine, because I keep seeing these small apartment buildings, and they're just now starting to clear the properties, and the streets that were empty not long ago are being filled with debris again, and nobody's there other than whoever's coming in to rip the stuff out and put it on the side of the street. So I'm just curious, before we get to the point where we get official with it, how are we getting the courtesy notices to those situations where there's not somebody to present it to?
So the first attempt, of course, is a site visit for direct contact with a property owner or representative of that property owner to speak with them directly. The second is a leave behind. Third is a phone call, and usually it's all of the above if we're not directly communicating with the property owner or the designated representative. So phone call. I don't believe that we've had to mail anybody any information in order to try to reach them. I think code enforcement feels highly confident that they've been able to speak with a representative or owner of every property at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about that. For the commercial properties, so you're saying that code enforcement has started issuing, or will be issuing notices of violation starting tomorrow for any businesses that still have debris on the street.
Correct.
It has to be removed by the 23rd. And so what you're saying is that